Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the July edition of the VLab Forum. This is Steve Smith, VLab Director, and I'm joined here by John Chattel, our technical, logistical, everything manager for the VLab Forum in beautiful downtown Silver Spring in the VLab Forum studios in the shadow of the giant acorn. Today, we are privileged to have Kari Sheets of the Office of Dissemination in the National Weather Service, who's going to talk to us about a very important project. I'm sure you will see that from her slides. A lot of interest in this project, a lot of participation across the Weather Service and other parts of NOAA. Project's just getting started. Kari's going to be giving us kind of a look forward. Our format, per usual, is about 30 minutes or so of content that Kari will provide, and then a Q&A session where everyone can ask her questions about that content or other things. So when we get to the Q&A, those of you on the line, please use the raise your hand feature in the GoToWebinar, and John will unmute you so you can ask your question directly to Kari, or use the chat to chat the question in which case either John or myself will relay your question to Kari that way. Also a reminder that this session is being recorded, and shortly after the conclusion, John will upload the recording to the VLab Forum website. You can use that to watch it again or share it with your friends or colleagues, etc. So, without further ado, Kari, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear. Thank you for that wonderful microphone, and you may proceed.
Great. Well, you can thank Eastern Region for the good microphone. We'll go ahead and get started. So, thanks for the great introduction, Steve. Talking about the Enterprise Viewer for GIS. This started as a cards request back in 2016. That's card 16-037 if you want to look it up in the system. And we have gotten funding to actually move forward with that development through the Hurricane Supplemental. I believe that was actually the request that went in 2018. So the MDC validated the cards request back in November of 2017. It also went through all of the different policy teams who commented and helped in documenting the statement of need for this project. The initial effort is going to be substantial, but we're excited about it. And because of the Hurricane Supplemental funding, we have some dedicated contractors who are going to be working on establishing this common design and code base. And then we'll all be able to leverage it to do future products. And I'll talk a little bit about the vision behind how we're going to go about that in the coming slides. So I've said Hurricane Supplemental already 5 times in less than 2 minutes, but that's because that's where the money came from. And so the purpose for what we're doing is to improve the public access and end user experience. We are looking at Weather Service mission here. So what do you need to do to be able to brief your core partners? If they can turn around and use it to brief the people they need to brief, then that's fine. But the validated requirements are coming from what does Weather Service staff need to complete the Weather Service mission. And then we want it to be consistent and reliable. So if you were to change and go from a WFO on one side of the country to the other side of the country, just like AWIPS, your tool for using an interactive map is going to look the same way. A little bit of background on this. Some of you may think, oh, I think I've heard of this before. Well, obviously, if we first had the request in 2016, you've probably heard about it for a while. We even had the development to operations team, part 1, that was an 18-month team of volunteers from across the agency who dedicated about 30% of their time with supervisor approval. It was voluntary. And helped to we got some symbology in place. We validated a lot of the requirements, ironed out what does it mean to say I want all precipitation products from the Weather Service. what do you really mean, or everything that's related to fire weather. Like, those are good ideas, but they're not quite at the requirement level. So that group really helped to get it written down and validated as actual requirements that the computer programmers will be able to program to now that we have them on board. We've also been working a lot on getting data out there in different GIS formats. We've been live for a little over 2 years, operational on IDP. We've been completely geographically redundant for about a month now, I guess, on a modern version of Esri software with the services we're putting out there right now. When Ridge comes on later this year or early next year, we will then also have an open source way to provide OGC compliant web services with weather service data. The philosophy right now is that we will probably use open source for much of the gridded data, and then things that are points, lines, or polygons will probably stay on the Esri stack. Just for resiliency and watching how software performs, so far that's made the most sense. But we're constantly reevaluating and trying new things. We have re-upped the D2O team. Actually, today was supposed to be the deadline for volunteering. We've got a good group of people that have volunteered. If you missed the call for that, you can email me, and I will get you the information on what it means to be a part of the D2O. As I said in the beginning, it's a voluntary team, and it does require supervisor approval to be able to participate. So this is just kind of one of those strategy slides. It's important to know how what we're doing aligns with what our leaders have set out as our strategy, as our short and long-term strategy. So better serving partners by providing the information in the consistent way, and also having it reliable so that there's somebody in weather service that's going to respond if it goes down in the middle of the night, and as well as improve just the consistency between product display. So right now, I think everyone has their favorite application. At last count, we were over 35 different interactive web map views within the weather service. And while that's great for you, if we have an emergency manager that has that is split between two areas of responsibility, if one of you is using one thing and the other one's using another, then even for the same event, they could be having to think in their mind, okay, wait, which one's going to give it to me this way? And we want to eliminate some of that so that, I mean, that if they wanted to use it themselves, they could even get the same information all for their own view. But like I said, we won't code for that, but we do know that that will be a benefit that our core partners will see. Here's our timeline. So we've been planning. We had a little bit of a delay. If some of you may have seen this slide before, and things have shifted a little bit to the right. It took us a little longer to onboard the team to actually write the code than we had initially intended. So that's actually going to be beginning within the next couple of weeks here in Q4 of FY19, and we'll continue for the next 2 quarters. We're going to have a little bit of overlap with quality assurance and development that we hadn't originally planned for, but we'll be using the D2O team and some of the existing dissemination GIS team to be able to do some of the QA while the coders are still coding. You'll notice there's a light blue and a dark blue. The dark blue is phase 1, so that's the part that looks explicitly at what it was written in the language of the hurricane supplemental, which is excessive precipitation events, QPE, and inundation. So a water layer and possibly even a tropical, what we're calling presentation layers. So that'll be groupings of data layers that are preset for use with functionalities that you would want to manipulate that data will be the first phase. And then we'll be looking to the MDC for what the presentation layers should be for the follow-on phases. I believe these slides can be shared out. That's a Google Doc, so if you have a NOAA login, you can access the link that's there. But basically, we have 268 requirements. Where did these come from? It started out in the rocks in 2016, asking them what would you like from an interactive web viewer. So it was early stage rocks. Some of them were rocks of one people at that point. And then we went with the cards process, and it went out to the different policy teams, and we asked them to validate it further. Then we brought together the initial development to operations team. We spent an entire day with Post-its and putting them up all over our room to see what redundant requirements we came up with from the different, and all of the CONUS regions were represented, MDL was represented, as well as dissemination in that room for coming up with those requirements. And most of the regions were represented by people who are in actual forecast offices. And then we had a couple of people from regional headquarters as well. So that's where all of the requirements came from, and they completely spread the full spectrum between data requirements, which is something that the Dissemination GIS team works on regularly in conjunction with the Weather Service GIS integrated work team. It goes to the functional, to what's the display look like, to how would you want to be able to manipulate data on a map. So I'm not going to read off specific requirements, but the link's there if you want to see where we're headed. So now what will it look like? The big red letters mock-up are on here for a reason. This is really, you're seeing the best of my best with working paint and cutting and pasting different applications together. So you may have seen an application and think, oh, this looks like it came off of EDD or NowCoast, or which is an NOS application that runs on IDP, or IRMA, which is a ERMA, which is another NOS environmental response application. And so it is that you saw it there because I screenshotted and cut and paste to give us a look of what we have here. So first and foremost, this was the one thing that came from all of the rocks back in 2016, was what I call basic web-based map functions. Pan, zoom, get info, that means you can click on a data layer and find out the text behind it or the attributes in the database. And then to be able to turn data layers on and off, or select data layers. We worked on the original D2O team, we had a colleague who was, at that point, worked for NESDIS in their education office. He's since moved out to California and works for Esri. But he had done a lot of different research on what does the human eye gravitate towards when you're looking at a computer screen. So that's the reason that what we call the table of contents, or the list of layers, is on the left side on all of these mock-ups. That's because the research that he did said that our eyes read in an F pattern. So the things that you're going to want to use most, you want on the far left side, and then the secondary things would be across the top, with the things that you're going to interact with least in the bottom right. So you're still going to interact with a map, but as far as finding information, we wanted it to be in what would be considered an F pattern. Then the next thing that I have added to all of these slides is a time slider, which is another critical piece for Weather Service. What good is weather information if you don't know, if you know where it is, fine, but the next question is going to be when. So this time slider actually came off of the NowCoast project. And we're going to work with them to borrow as much code as we can, but they were the first application I ever saw that was able to take data that has different times and mesh it to where you have the valid data for, let's say, 9 a.m. for every data layer that you have turned on will display at the same time, which is not a trivial thing when we all know data is released at different times. So really grateful to be able to continue to work with NowCoast as partners to borrow functionality such as that. So the next thing is still another basic web map function, and that's a legend. What am I looking at? So we'll use something, thinking right now probably tabbed functions like this is, but we may get into the development and find something that works better. But basically, at the top left, the first tab was layers that we were looking at before, and now this is the legend to tell us what the data looks like on the map. And then we move into some other user requested functionality. So a lot of people still want to be able to create PowerPoints. You want to be able to say, well, this is what I told my core partners on this day, and the map's going to change in 5 minutes. So we'll do a print feature, which, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. This is one step before that. People sometimes want to be able to go ahead and take that data, just like I said, and have it captured in time, but be able to put it into a desktop map, or be able to put it onto one of the functions. One of the tools out there that's really great for telling stories after the fact is AGOL, and you can upload a shapefile to that. So any data that has the capability of being downloaded as a shapefile will be able to be downloaded as a shapefile. Now this is where I was getting ahead of myself. The next function would be, can I just print an image of the map? I don't really want the data, but I want to be able to say, this is the picture that I showed you 3 hours before a hurricane made landfall. So yes, you'll be able to choose the size of the quote-unquote paper, and then print to PDF or to an image file, with the idea that you would be able to put an image file into something like a PowerPoint document or a Google Doc, or in a PDF, you'll be able to go ahead and print that to paper, or however else you would like to share, or even just share the PDF via email. Another common requested functionality is what we like to call bookmarks. So thinking about when you use a browser and you bookmark your favorite web pages, within the application, you'd be able to bookmark your favorite groupings of layers. And we're using the bookmark terminology as one that the NOS IRMA application uses, and so that's where the screen capture came from here for that. So they have done it, and we'll probably have something similar where you can hide the bookmarks if you aren't wanting to look at it, or you can pop them up. So this would be where if you have a standard set of briefing slides that you normally use, you could bring this in and just click through them just like you would slides in a PowerPoint. We don't have a requirement to be able to augment text onto the map screen yet. I know that that is a requirement for the Unified Graphics application, and I've been sitting on that team, and we're looking for ways that we'll be able to share functionality between the two projects. Another thing is, I just want to see the map. So this will be a way to wipe out the navigation pane on the left with a simple one-click to be able to just see the map. This is another, if you wanted to do a screenshot, this is useful for that, or if you were just wanting to pan and zoom and talk to the map on your own with the data already displayed, are reasons that this is a super useful functionality. Another thing that we have that's requested a lot is at the top of the slide here, and that's to be able to search based on both data or location. So the IRMA application has a little checkbox, and that's where, again, where this screenshot came from, where you would click here if you wanted to search for a location, and if you were looking for data, you would just type the data into the search bar. So that would be for the data that's actually added to the map already, and would be able to be discoverable in the table of contents. The table of contents can sometimes be overwhelming and not easy to navigate if you're trying to get to things quickly. So that's why we have that search there. Then you may say, okay, well, I'm in the fire presentation layer, but I really want to add tropical forecasts to it, but that's not one of my preset data layers. So then we're going to borrow functionality from EDD, and that's to be able to search the entire GIS database for data like that you would then be able to add to your layer. You could add it in and make it as part of a bookmark, but once you end your session, it probably won't become part of that presentation layer. And the presentation layers will be weather service, service area, or IDSS based. Right now we're looking at, by the time we're fully built out, having probably 11 or 12 presentation layers. So then, now that I'm talking about presentation layers, the question would be, well, what if I want to jump from, say, a water presentation layer to a fire presentation layer? This is another functionality that is part of EDD right now that we will bring in, and Jonathan's part of the D2O team, so looking to leverage as much of his work as we can into this operational version, and that will be the ED term was, or EDD term was interface. So we're going to use presentation layer as the terminology there, and it would be as simple as this, probably a drop down where it basically changes your URL for you without you having to use browser bookmarks. And that's kind of what it would look like, a drop down. And more on just being able to search for the location. I got get ahead of myself earlier. So that's kind of the high level common functionality that I get asked about consistently. This is a few slides just to highlight highlight a little bit more about commonality between some of the existing tools that you're already using. This screenshot here is from the GIS, what we call the GIS portal, weather.gov/GIS. We've leveraged AGOL, which is called ArcGIS Online. It's part of our Esri Enterprise License toolkit. And this is here strictly for display purposes, to show the web services that you can actually link from the tabs across the top. So this also shows that we may decide we want to have even more tabbed functionality to create, they call this a dashboard within the viewer. We haven't made that decision yet, but that's one of the things that potentially could come in. I mentioned several times the NOS IRMA application. I've got a link here. This is to show that they're actively using something similar. They call them regions to what we'll call presentation layers. So they align themselves with the Coast Guard and EPA. So they have regional views that line up with Coast Guard and EPA and regional response team regions. And that way they can have bookmarks for specific incidents, and they can tailor their data layers to environmental information in those specific regions. NOS Now Coast, many of you know that we have that. We manage it from a infrastructure standpoint, and NOS does the development. They also have something similar to presentation layers. NowCoast was originally developed as a tool for the marine community, but then it became very popular for general use. So they still have a tailored view for mariners that really emphasizes nautical charts and other marine data, but the general use doesn't have those types of layers included in their default view. I already mentioned when on one of the first slides that NowCoast has a very advanced time slider, so we'll be looking to replicate that functionality within the viewer. And then these are several Weather Service developed tools that also have different time functionalities. I think you can do almost everything you can do on any one of these with the single one on NowCoast, so that's why it was highlighted first. But basically, like I said earlier, time is critical for weather, so it is a top priority functionality to include. And when you access the slides, there's links to every one of these tools that are displayed here as screenshots. More functionality, the selectable concurrent layers, meaning that you can put temperature and wind on the same map if you wanted to, or you can put river gauges and QPE on the same map. Even if one of our partners has data available as a web service, we can add that in as a data layer. So if FAA gave us data that you wanted, like the Aviation Weather Center, and we can overlay that with our aviation weather forecast products. And I'm a little bit ahead of the full 30 minutes, but that's what I've got for now. So happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Kari, for the run through there. So we will, at this point, transition to the Q&A. So if you would like to use the raise your hand feature, please do so now. Those of you on the GoToWebinar, and John will unmute you, or use the chat. Do we have anybody early yet?
Yes, we do.
All righty.
Okay.
Well,
We got a very eager one over here.
let's go to somebody on the line first.
Sure. So we have Joseph Moore, and he asked this question back on slide 19. I'm not sure there's, you have to go there, but in case it proves beneficial, slide 19. He asked, is there a linkage to the IDSS management system, IMS, so that IMS could support the ability to send a partner an alert email and then have a link to the GIS viewer with the current radar warning and the location, say, points or polygon of DSS event support request on the map of the user?
I have not talked with that group yet, so I'm not super familiar with the getting a little bit of feedback with the management system, but anything that's on that will be displayed on the viewer will be able to be sent out as a link. So the way that most of these viewers work, each data that you display is basically there's a number for it, and it gets appended to the URL when you're viewing it. So we will do some things to make it easier to send those links, but as long as the data remains in the database, you could even just continually save the URLs for whatever you're doing as a regular bookmark in your browser. But that's just not always feasible. So you would be able to send the URL for either one of your bookmarks within that application or just for whatever view you had at the moment. So Ridge will be the first presentation layer. It's a little bit of a step outside it won't be the first full presentation layer, but what you will see when Ridge comes online is the first concept of a presentation layer. So when you specifically say radar, the Ridge presentation layer would be an easy one to send as a link. That's the best I can answer now. If I didn't quite get what you were asking, you can try again, or you can send me an email with maybe some screenshots or links, and I can get back to you. And my email's on the screen here.
Okay, thanks. We have a question in the room from Mark Laudeman.
Hey, Kari. Yeah, it's Mark Laudeman, Water Prediction. Thanks a lot for the presentation. As you said, the table of contents or whatever on the left side can be a long list, maybe even overwhelming. I was hoping you could comment a little bit on how much of that list would also be expected to be available directly through data services. As you know, we're trying to really focus on data services that say this viewer could use, or parties who are capable of ingesting data services and making their own maps could use. So could you comment a little bit on the data services side and how those would be, if and how much those would be accessible via this?
Yes, so in the metadata, which would be able to be discovered basically on a right click of those data layers, you would be able to discover the URL for the web service or the REST endpoint or WMS-GET capability, is what those URL, that's basically an XML file that the computers know how to translate them into the map. So anything anything that we put out publicly anyway, it will be able to be discovered as a service and added into someone else's own application. Just like I said with the downloading of shapefiles, if it's allowable for the shapefiles to be downloaded, if you had clicked them on in your map layer, you would be able to do that through the download functionality. I'm clarifying there because there are certain, like, the easiest example that comes to mind are the hurricane models. If we got to the point of putting the hurricane models in this, which I'm not saying we are, but that's one that we don't typically expose the raw data to the public. So we wouldn't, in that case, I mean, even in that case, we would probably be looking in, this would be in one of the later phases. if I had to guess, I would say phase 3 or 4, where we do password. Basically, you need to log in with your LDAP to get some data. That's how the IRMA application works. They have it set up to where just NOAA, all government, because they have some litigation-sensitive data in there, and it gives access that way. Where that's not a phase 1 piece, but we can see where the requirement. We've even talked with you and the others at Water Prediction about that maybe being something that would be required, and that would be for data that we want our staff to be able to use when they're using the tool, but that isn't cleared for consumption beyond that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thanks, Kari, for all that. Just a little follow-up. So given the number of items or elements that would be on that table of contents on the left side, we'll probably see a rather significant increase in the amount of data available through data services, or if nothing else, at least be available through a unified sort of endpoint there. Maybe it's all scattered throughout, but this would really consolidate it.
Correct.
And really grow the list.
Yeah, so the development of those services are one of the tasks that the D2O will be available for D2O members. We'll get VPN access to the IDP development space for that to work, and work in conjunction with the team that's already been developing it in the dissemination GIS group. Part of the hurricane supplemental funding is giving us a dedicated SA. We don't have them onboarded yet, but that's been one of our slowdowns to getting data available. Is just like everyone else, we get in line for things to go on to IDP, but by having the dedicated SA, we'll be able to make data layers available more quickly.
Okay, thanks, Kari.
All right, John, what do we have?
So we have a question from Brian Conley. He asks, is it possible to view metadata associated with the layers?
Absolutely. As a federal agency, we are required to have metadata accessible for any geospatial data we put out there. My guess is it will be a right click on the data layer, and then one of the like maybe 4 things that would pop up would be metadata. That's how most of the other applications have done it, but we absolutely will have metadata because we could get shut down otherwise. And it's also just good practice. Like, you don't want to give people data without telling them how to use the data.
Thank you. Next, John.
Let's see. Gary Goggins would like to know what experience do the contractors have in GIS programming and development?
We've only got part of the team onboarded so far, but they both have experience with other parts of NOAA and programming, actually web-based GIS systems, and then also some experience with other federal scientific organizations. So they know what they're doing, and they're excited to be developing.
Okay. Kari, I've got a couple questions. So on the sort of requirements for this, that one of the fundamental things that I think could be clarified is this application has this IDSS sort of mission, which is, as we know now, focused on our core partners and deep relationship core partners, which is a much smaller set than, of course, the general public. However, my understanding is that the viewer will be accessible to the general public. So how are we going to sort of present that? Will it be sort of hidden that we don't, I mean, it'll be publicly available, but we won't be having it as like a marquee thing on our public web pages, or are we intending to have it front and center on our Weather Service pages? And then, so how do you respond to that?
It will be available as an API that can be embedded in any of our web pages. And so the point is, when we're looking at it, when we say it's like IDSS is tailored to our deep core partners, and I've said, like, we're really looking at what it takes for us to be able to give them the information they need. So we're looking at what are the tools we need to have in Weather Service's hands to make that happen. But at the same time, we're not hiding it from anyone. Anyone can use it. We're going to want to hear the requirement need from a Weather Service office for IDSS primarily, or for other Weather Service mission-related needs, before just, oh, my grandma wants that lettering to be purple instead of green. That's a requirement, but that's not a requirement that's going to be validated and coded to. So we're not designing it. If you want to use it, you can use it, but the functionality is geared to Weather Service mission. Does that help?
Yeah. So in that context, then how are you going to walk the line with scalability and performance? So, I mean, if it's available to the general public, then it's conceivable that a landfalling hurricane, it could get pounded by the general public, not just the core partners and our Weather Service staff. So that seems like a kind of a challenge.
Yeah, when I've talked to other developers of similar interactive web maps, it's really about, as Mark G just asked, the data behind it. So keeping our database resilient is going to be the key thing to making that work. And if we had done this when this meeting was originally scheduled, I would have said our services have never had a database issue. But guess what? We had an issue this weekend, so I can't say that. But we believe that was related to a patch that was applied, and so we're actively thinking of digging into that to prevent that happening in the future. But what we've watched this week, once we went back to green, is we're only using a sliver of the memory that's allocated to us for databases, and that's what got us over the weekend, was the RAM for the database got exceeded, or we met the limit of it, and then the services timed out, and that's why they went offline. And so that's going to be the key piece for us to watch for scalability.
Okay, so sort of a follow-up to that is, will you setting from the get-go to have this all enabled for Google Analytics, so you can sort of check to see who's using it and how, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I don't know if for sure if Google Analytics is what we're going to use, but we do have monitoring set up for everything we do through the tools already available at NCO, as well as abusive user is a term that you'll hear with web-based applications, and so it will be behind Akamai, and we've worked with them. We've seen that with the Nowcoast team has seen that with the Nowcoast actually front-end application, where they've had a few people that were just, actually it was their back-end services, where they would just script to scrape the server, or to hit the services way more frequent than was necessary. So we use that to identify what's going on as well. If we can work out Google Analytics to help us out, we will definitely do that. I know the NOS ARMA team has done that. And then we also have something called GIS Arc Monitor. So any of the services that we're using the Esri software to generate, we have a team member that's focused solely right now on making the most of that monitoring tool, so that we can see trends in the data that we're already providing.
Okay, thanks, John. We have another.
Yes, we have a question from John Stokecoat, and he asked, is the goal to replace these other GIS viewers, or will this be standalone? Will the data from other GIS viewers in the National Weather Service be accessible from the NWS Enterprise GIS viewer? Yeah.
So this is a consolidation effort. I'm not at the level of management to say when and if things will get turned off, but the goal is for this to be the operational system. I'm not aware of any of those other systems being supported 24/7 and having geographic redundancy, which is actually what you need to have in order to be have high availability on a federal IT system, and we will have that. So we are building it with that intention. It being a top priority goal for the Weather Service indicates that management is supporting it as such, but I can't tell you when the other things will go away, but the writing is on the wall.
Great.
Okay, thanks. Another one, John?
Sure. Woody Roberts would like to know, is there an option to display data on different map projections?
We have a requirement from Alaska Region for that to happen. The challenge there is that's not really how web maps function. And I'm going to try to stay at a high level, but if you want to get into the weeds on this, it's actually very closely related to what I did my master's project on. So I'm happy to discuss at length offline, but I won't endure everyone to that. Basically, a web map viewer uses Web Mercator because you're in essence looking at a globe on your computer screen. So yes, it's still a projection because it's flat screen, but with the technology behind the web-based applications, they're able to treat the map more spherical than we could on true paper maps. And so it's also seamless. So when you think about, like, if you have ArcMap on your desktop, it's really thinking about, okay, what is this file on my machine going to use as its reference system? When you're panning and zooming from Louisiana to Anchorage, if you were wanting a different map projection all along the way, you would actually be asking the application to change the whole math behind how it's displaying the data. So you can't really seamlessly pan if you're wanting it to change projections as you pan. That said, we will look into being able to have OCONUS have projections other than Web Mercator. For the Pacific, Web Mercator should still be fine. So it's mainly Alaska, I think, that will have the issue, but it's not as easy as it sounds. But we know that it is important the closer you get to the poles, because Mercator gets really stretched at that point. So that's probably one of our tougher challenges with the requirements. It's out there. I don't know how we're going to solve it, but yes, it's on the table.
Okay, thanks, Kari. So getting back to your sort of timeline, so it seems like you have a kind of tsunami of functionality that you ultimately want to get in this viewer, but you're only going out to the end of FY 2020 with the plan right now. So how much of this functionality do you think you can realistically capture by the end of FY 2020, and what's the plan beyond FY 2020?
So it's a fewfold. Our classic answer, which is we all know is reality, that funding. We have the supplemental funding that gets us through FY 20, and then we have some. It's just still a priority of dissemination, so we will continue to do it with what we have on staff, like with our Fed staff that we have and are funded. It'll just slow down if we don't secure additional funding beyond that. But this is a really focused next 15 months of development. So as much of that functionality as we can get developed in that time frame, we're going to. And I mean, currently we have 2 back-end web developers on. They're sitting in dissemination. I think they're on this call today. And then we are bringing on a front-end web developer. We're still waiting on just some of the onboarding process, that happens anytime you bring a new person on. But he should be in within the next couple of weeks. And then we're also working on about another 3 to 4 people to bring on. So for at least a year, we'll have people that all they are doing is developing and implementing the system. As well as the development operations team, and I think we're at about 15 people right now That may even be a little lower than what we are. We had a few more emails come in even today. So the more of you that are able to help us, the more of that we get as well. Now we know that it depends on what your skill sets are. I should have made a ploy for this earlier. When it comes to testing, anyone and everyone that wants to help us test, we're going to be looking for that because we want to catch any bugs we have as early as possible. We don't want to go live and have to go back and fix something. So if you find yourself to be someone that uses a system and can find anything that's wrong with it, we want you on the team.
Okay, so what keeps you up? What do you perceive as the greatest risk for this, and what keeps you up at night when you look at the next 15 months and beyond?
Being too popular, something like what happened last weekend, where we had been functioning for 2 years fine, and what we still don't, honestly, I mean, we're pretty sure it was patch related. We know that it was RAM related to database, but like it came out of left field. So I typically, if anybody's ever worked with me, they know that I talk about gremlins in the system. So gremlins in the system is probably what I would say is my biggest risk. And then just any kind of a curveball, anytime someone moves on for a great career step for them, then that's a disadvantage to the team that's been working with them. So I wish all of my colleagues the best, but I hope you don't choose to do something different for another 15 months. So that being able to really just focus on it and the plan, be able to execute according to plan, and then the whole gremlin in the system thing. Like if we get hosed by something like that, it can, and if we can't figure out what the gremlins are, it derails a project. I've seen that on another project that I work with, where yeah.
So mitigation of gremlins. Will there be an instance in Boulder and College Park IDP initially, or only one of the IDP sites?
The way that we're trying to deploy things now is that it goes to one, and then as soon as that one goes live, we go to the other, and they're stair-stepping together. So you would, within 1 to 2 weeks after it's up in one, we would have it up in the other, maybe a month. Probably initially it would be a month because we'll do the 30-day stability test on both systems, but we're not going all the way through on one and then going back to the other.
Okay, so if you had a database problem in College Park, you could fail over to Boulder with a clean database.
Correct.
Okay, so that's obviously good, yeah.
Yeah, we're putting as many fail-safes in as possible, but I mean, honestly, I think it's what keeps any of us up at night is when we were talking about it Monday morning, a heat wave across most of the country is honestly a life-threatening situation. So having our data go down, our services go down in the midst of decision makers relying on them to protect people's lives. I mean, that's honestly what keeps me up at night.
Okay, John, do we have any other questions?
Yes, Jack Zettelmeyer would like to know, for the National Weather Service data not already in a service, i.e. IDP-GIS, will there be a stronger push to make that happen?
Yes, that's probably, I haven't actually thought about the percentages, but I would say it's at least 50% of this project, because we have the best functionality out there, and if we don't have the data to feed it, we don't have a very good application.
Okay. Joseph Moore had another question for you. Also, will this viewer be built with mobile friendly in mind, and also for display size resolution that, say, don't exist right now, but might be popular in 2021, 22 when this becomes operational? Will it be flexible enough to handle these display sizes and input methods?
we don't have a mobile version on as an initial phase requirement. When it gets to these interactive map viewers, that's actually really difficult because a small screen, I mean, you saw how much screen maintenance we were having to do just with a computer screen. Think about cutting that, by a 16th. So as much as we can, we will definitely be 508 compliant because that is a federal regulation. But as far as the adaptability for different screen sizes, I don't know of any interactive map that you can get 100% functionality on a mobile device. But as much of it as we can make work, we will. But a PC browser, I mean, like I could see where I haven't thought much about the tablet size. Having it function on a tablet is definitely going to be important. Having it function on a cell phone is not super feasible.
So Kari, thanks, Kari. This is Steve again. Follow up on the sort of testing of this. So you can test the software, you can test this website, the performance, the functionality, the stability, all that stuff. But how about the users, the forecasters doing IDSS, and the partners that they're providing the IDSS for? How are you going to evaluate that, whether you're hitting the mark with regard to those requirements?
So part of that's the vision behind the development to operations team. Anybody on that team will have VPN access, and they'll be able to evaluate and provide feedback as we move along. Once we move to the QA tier on IDP, we will do a 30-day stability test, and then that's when we're going to say hit it hard. So basic functionality, this misses the mark. That feels a little late, so that's where the D2O members from your regions or your centers are really critical. But as far as like tweaking things, the 30-day stability test and the earlier in that you can get it back to us. So it might not, I mean, if it's broken, then we'll have to fix it and restart the 30-day test. If it needs to be enhanced, then it will need to be worked into a upgrade in the development life cycle, which we don't have completely ironed out what those are going to look like yet. We're doing that kickoff meeting next week, and that's one of the things that we're going to work on during that time.
So in getting feedback from the external partners, that is through the D2O team. They're there to reach out to their core partners and expose the early, I guess, dev site to them and have them take a look at it?
The only way they'll be able to expose it to them at the dev phase would be if they had their partners in office with them. Or if they were at their partner's site and they logged in on their government laptop there through VPN and showed them some of what we're working on. The 30-day stability test, and we'll be working with AFS on the 10102 process, will be where we're looking for feedback on what we're developing. That's the QA tier can be exposed to the public. The dev tier is behind the VPN wall.
Right. So how about OPG? I mean, can you do some kind of evaluation through the OPG?
I hadn't thought about it. We'll look into it.
Okay. John, do we have anyone else?
Yeah, just real quickly, Jack wanted to clarify that you indeed said that 50%, half of this effort is to create services, with the other half interface development?
I was meaning, that's why I said I hadn't really put a number on it before. That's my estimate, or at least as importance. Like getting it developed is, and that was an overall, like, if I had to say, to get this thing functional, what do you need to focus on? Half of it is getting it built and getting it functional. The other half is having the data to get at it. That does not mean that the funding or the hours will break out equally to that. I was speaking from an importance and what do we need to do to be functional.
Okay.
Sorry, Kari, Steve again. So I asked you about what the risks. So what do you think is the key to success for this project? What would, if you tell people in an elevator that what all the things that you want to happen, what's the one thing that is really, really important for the success?
For this to really be a collaborative effort, it's something that I've dreamt about for years, but my dream only matters to me and my circle. We want this to be a weather service tool, and in order to do that, we all need to come together to make sure it's meeting our needs, as well as to get excited and get behind it. And like the question about, will these other things go away? Well, those other things will go away naturally if we all rally behind this and make it the tool we want to use. And so that would be success to me.
Sounds good to me. Any last questions, raising hands or otherwise, Sean?
Yes, we have one from Gary Goggins. It's a rather long one, but he says, even though we will be, there will be 24/7 support, and the issue we've had with IDP lately, and 99% reliability stated by Michelle Manelli, over 80 hours of downtime per year. What efforts will the National Weather Service take in regard to making IDP robust enough, especially during times of extreme weather, so that the viewer can be successful?
I mean, Michelle is my office director, so that's her response on the webinar last week would be the same for that. I mean, like you said, we're sitting on IDP, so the vision from our leadership for how to make IDP last for the long haul is what that is, and so they're working hard. So I don't have anything else to add to what Michelle provided last week.
Okay, yeah. Obviously, its profile will, like other things in IDP, but this in particular will be very high once it becomes operational and reported out at the morning stand-up if things aren't working as they're supposed to. So I think it's both tactical and strategic. But yeah, Michelle's doing what she can within the resources to make it successful.
Yeah, and the morning stand-up is actually a great point for that, is that I envision that this will be a key part of the morning stand-up. Any data that's shown currently on a map, that I would see the National IDSS presentation layer as being what they're using to brief out those items once it's ready. So it will, not only would it be reported on, but if it's down, it's going to be incredibly obvious at the stand-up.
Right. Good point. All righty, we have reached the top of the hour, so I will call it an end of the VLab forum. So thank you, Kari, again, for a very informative talk, and we wish you the best of luck moving forward. And again, if you have questions or you'd like to join this effort and volunteer for behalf of your organization, then contact her in email. The cutoff, as she said, I guess is today, but she'll take, I'm sure, other folks who want to join in. Yes, and so going forward, again, reminder: this will be the recording of this will be uploaded to the VLab forum website. The slide deck is already there, so if you want to share the slide deck, you can go there and get that. We're trying to get a topic for August. John's working on that, but in September we've got coming up scientific visualization of ensemble and NBM probability fields in the cloud, to be presented by Dana Strom. In October, a talk by Kim Runk, speaking of OPG, about evaluating the meso-analyst role for collaborative severe weather IDSS. So we'll be looking forward to those two talks, and we hope to snag a good one for August, and John will get the info out on that as soon as we have it. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you hopefully in August.